Good evening, viewers. Tonight is set to be extremely important as the world awaits the US Supreme Court's verdict on Trump's tariffs. The court will decide the very validity of Trump's tariffs. These tariffs, imposed from early 2025 onwards, shook global trade, redefined geopolitical borders, fragmented supply chains, and affected cross-border businesses. While the core rationale behind the tariff move was protecting American interests and equalizing trade deals, it was used to do, maybe, the opposite of what it proclaimed to do. Tariffs have been used by the Trump administration as a tool to bargain demands that go beyond the realm of just business. Take the example of India. Our exporters were imposed with the sharpest 50% duties, out of which 25% were penalty taxes for our purchase of Russian oil. Because Trump's administration argues that countries like India and China that buy Russian oil have been indirectly empowering Russia's war machine. But tonight, Trump's tariff chapter will either be closed or upheld, thereby resulting in two opposing consequences for global trade. If struck down, importers may seek refunds of over $150 billion that they paid in duties. Markets could rally with retail, tech, and consumption getting a boost. But if these tariffs are upheld, volatility in markets could intensify at a time when uncertainty around a trade deal between India and the US have already dampened investor sentiment and made a lot of retail investors cautious. Before we move on and board our panelists, there are three essential points that need to be kept in mind. Number one, Trump used a special emergency law called International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, of 1977 to impose these broad-based tariffs. He used this route to expedite the process of imposing tariffs without full approval from Congress. Number two, this morning, Trump took to Truth Social to post that the United States of America has the lowest trade deficit since 2009 and going even lower. He also mentioned that the GDP, is expected to come in over 5%. All these incredible, he says, numbers is thanks to tariffs. Point number three, he recently greenlit the Russia Sanctions Act that could potentially impose 500% tariffs on countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, and uranium. And this, of course, makes India extremely vulnerable because we do buy oil from Russia. So to discuss the implications of the US Supreme Court's verdict on these tariffs and a lot more, we have Meera Shankar, diplomat and former Indian ambassador, R.K. Vij, president, the Textile Association of India, Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and Gurucharan Das, and author and former CEO, PNG India. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. We'll have the other guests come in as well, but I'm being told that we have Gurucharan Das joining us at this given point in time. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time. Let's begin with you as the others join on. My first question to you is, drawing from your experience as a former CEO, how could the Supreme Court's verdict impact multinational corporations operating in India, especially regarding supply chain cost and consumer prices, because that matters the most?
Well, absolutely. The impact is profound. Profound both for multinationals or for Indian companies. They both are subject to the same tariffs. The worst part, of course, is that the job losses in certain industries like shrimp, diamonds, jewelry, textiles will be substantial. My own belief is that we may get a mixed verdict tonight from the court. And in other words, you're absolutely right. Mr. Trump used the IEEPA law of 1977, which gave him emergency powers. And the argument that was used by the government was that the trade deficit and the national debt of America was so high that the president could then impose, he could say, now this is an emergency. And if the justices buy this argument, obviously it will be upheld. But the opposite argument is that of the opposition, which is that the authority to determine tariffs lies only with the Congress according to the Constitution. In fact, all economic issues, unlike security issues, the authority is with the Congress. Now, the arguments made, oral arguments that the justices made when this law was first challenged in November 25, some judges were skeptical. And they were skeptical because they did not see it as an emergency. They could see security threats like drugs, which could be in the purview of the president, but not trade deficits. And so what I personally think is that Mr. Trump has enough pals on the Supreme Court who may go with him. And for example, there may be a division, as far as India is concerned, that our 25% tariff on account of buying Russian oil may be thrown out by the court, that will not stand, because that's clearly not an emergency of that nature. But the justices might rule that the overall tariffs, which is about 10, 15%, that have been introduced in all countries, they might actually not, they might stand. In other words, they may, because they may see it as, they may interpret the national debt and trade deficit in favor of Mr. Trump's argument that it's an emergency. So let us see. That's my view. Mr. Trump is going to try, he says, if he loses, they're going to try to impose tariffs under some other laws, such as the Section 232 or 301, but those will take time. And those will specifically relate then to showing security threats are required for those. So that's my own view. I personally think that India has not played its hand very well in this game, but that's not the question for tonight. The court's judgment is the question for tonight.
Exactly. The court's judgment, of course, is the main focus for this evening. I have others as well who have already joined the panel. Thank you so much for your time. My follow-up question to you, Mr. Das, would be that there are two layers, right, to this verdict. On one hand, if the Trump's tariffs are, of course, approved and they're upheld, then there's a chance that India could be at a point where it is extremely vulnerable as far as its relationship with the US goes. Because just a while ago, we were listening to the press briefing of the MEA, and he said that India is still interested in locking a mutually beneficial relationship, a trade deal with the US. Now, if the tariffs are upheld, how do you see India's position as far as a geopolitical relationship and a trade deal with the US goes? And what could the implications be?
Well, I think much more serious is the question that the law that is being introduced in Congress, whereby we might be subject to a 500% tariff for buying Russian oil, that will totally wipe out our economic relationship with the United States, our largest trading partner. And that would be an absolute disaster for our country. And that also is not something that can be challenged in the court, because the law will come from the Congress. The Congress is initiating that particular law, and that's a much bigger threat for us. So I personally think that we have to rethink this business of buying Russian oil. The stake is too big. The issues here are not emotional issues, they're issues of national interest. And it is of far greater interest for us to have our biggest trading partner. I mean, the economic growth of our country, the future of trade, and whether it be a joint supply chain, such as in the case of Apple phones, iPhones, and all. I mean, my hope was that actually iPhones had shown the way for the future. We should go and try and woo all the leaders of the major brands in the world to come and follow the example, and it can be done. Follow the example of Apple phones, and that's where prosperity, middle class rising, or the 2047 Viksit Bharat goal, all these become possible. And we just cannot cut off our relationship with the United States, I think. And I just wouldn't. I would say that. It's
Right.
not worth national ego or any other deal. We have to watch out our own national interest here.
Exactly. We have to watch out our own national interests, and we cannot afford to cut our relationship entirely with the United States of America. Well pointed. But Meera Shankar, I'd like to get you in, Ms. Shankar. As a former ambassador, how do you assess the potential impact of Supreme Court's verdict on US-India diplomatic relations, especially if the tariffs are upheld and lead to further escalations like the proposed 500% duties on Indian goods?
Well, I think that's the worst case scenario. So let's look at other scenarios also. The markets are betting 70% that the Supreme Court will not uphold the tariffs. Those are the markets in the US. They say there's a 30% chance that it could be upheld, or a 70% chance that it's likely to be struck down. So the greater possibility of it is being struck down. But it's a limited judgment. It's basically the use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act on which, by Trump, to impose these tariffs, on which the Supreme Court is pronouncing. Has he exceeded his authority under that? And in terms of the normal distribution of power, it is Congress which has the authority over all budgetary appropriations, including tariffs. But, the president has other provisions in various other trade acts in his toolkit, which could be used, such as Section 301 or 122 and so on, which could be used to apply tariffs. But these provisions generally have guardrails. First of all, they require an investigation by the International Trade Commission to establish that damage is being done to the US, or that there has been dumping and therefore safeguards are required, or the one where he can impose tariffs citing a trade deficit, then it limits the tariff to 15%. So those provisions, are more lengthy because there's a process which has to be complied with, and a finding that, yes, this is, injuring, doing material injury to US industry, or that it's being dumped below fair price or whatever. And there are time frames. Say, for instance, safeguard duty applies only for a certain period of time. Then you have to lift it. Or, as I said, if you're citing a trade deficit and the president is using executive powers to impose tariffs, then there's a 15% ceiling on the tariff which can be imposed. So I don't see Trump meekly accepting, even if the Supreme Court strikes down the legality of the methods he has used for this. But the second issue is then, if I may, that companies in the US, 100 companies, have already filed suit preemptively seeking reimbursements from the US government for these tariffs. So it is going to have a huge impact, both on US markets as well as markets globally. and it's likely to roil the markets because this demand for repayment or reimbursement,
Yeah.
Could impact U.S. finances. It's $200 billion, which the U.S. has made till
Yes.
October. Bloomberg has calculated that if you take an annual basis, then it's about $30 billion a month in revenue that the US has been earning from this. So then, it impacts the Fed if so much money is in the system, whether the Fed will reduce interest rates, which
Ms.
will have
Shankar,
its own impact on the market.
Ms. Shankar, we'll
And
explore
on
the implications in markets in just a bit, but you've pointed at some really important factors. And Mr. Gurucharan Das had also pointed at the fact that if the legality of Trump's tariffs is struck down, but it is I don't think Trump would, ignore the Section 301, the provisions of Section 301 that allows him to go ahead and explore the extent to which these tariffs can be imposed. I'll also get R.K. Vij in this conversation. Mr. Vij, how might the Supreme Court's decision on these tariffs affect India's textile exports to the US, particularly if refunds are issued and lead to a surge in competitive imports?
Ma'am, Ram Ram. Actually, from the last 3 months, when the USA put 50% tariff on India and other countries 25 to 30%, we were we will not able to digest that thing. That what are the material we are exporting to our home textile and majorly the cotton garment to USA about $12 billion in a year. So we were very sudden we were not feeling well. So then immediately whatever the material was in pipeline from last 3-4 months, we reduced our rate to 50 to 20%. And then the buyers of America also just adjusted and the export was going on. But in between, we thought that we were thinking that tariff will maybe come down to 25 to 30%, but now sudden 500%. Now, whether it is 100%, 200%, 500%, it is not affected to textile because we are already started looking after the other market, EU market, UK market, and then FTA with New Zealand, Japan, African market. Ultimately, we have to stand on our own feet. Because in textile, always we are passing through bumpy roads. But now, again, yes, earlier we were thinking that it will take 3 to 4 months to settle down our export because our total export is about $38 billion and $12 billion was 30% going to USA. So now we will think that we have to stand our own once. Yeah, it will take for us to 6 to 7 months. It is very tough and tough for the small scale units because they don't have the money. They have to buy, borrow and other things. So it is very difficult. But ultimately we have to, and more, as my fellow said, that Supreme Court, this 500%, I think Supreme Court will not, will turn down this thing. And still, we are ready to face this thing. So we will restrict our import. We will increase our consumption in the domestic. And next 7-8 months, it is a tough time for us, but we'll have to, if we have to achieve our target of $350 billion by 2030-31, then we have to do it.
I understood your point. You are basically saying that Trump's tariffs have tested the industry to such an extent where diversification has become the key strategy and, in fact, perhaps the only option. I'll get Mr. Sajjanhar as well. As a former diplomat, sir, what are the potential ripple effects on international alliances if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs, potentially weakening the US's ability to impose unilateral trade measures?
Yeah, thank you very much, Malika, for having me. I think, what the earlier panelists have said, that it might be a temporary respite because Mr. Trump seems to be riding on a high wave. Politically and strategically, he seems to be riding on a high wave after what has been done in Venezuela. So he's not going to take it lying down. He's not going to accept that this is a fait accompli and I have to sort of abide by that. He'll find some other means. So, as far as the global community is concerned, there might be this temporary sense of relief or rejoicing that, these things have been struck down. But Mr. Trump is going to come back very viciously all over again. But while saying all that, I find the comments of Mr. Arkevich both a little disturbing at one point when he says that the small scale industry is going to be affected very adversely. And so, of course, I think domestically we need to do everything so that we protect the small scale industry. But on the other hand, I find his comments very encouraging that the industry is looking at other markets and has been successful in getting access to other markets. Whether it is UK, now European Union will also come in, and some of the others. But that having been said, let me also say that the US market continues to be extremely significant for us, extremely important for us. We should not be writing it off absolutely. We have been negotiating right from the time that Prime Minister Modi went to the United States on 13th February, and there was this decision taken that we have a mini bilateral trade agreement. We have been negotiating in good faith. We should continue to negotiate in good faith. If Mr. Trump, I think at least on 3 or 4 occasions, Malika, he has said that India is reducing its offtake of oil from Russia. Correct. If that is their understanding, we should press them to remove the additional 25% tariffs, because once that additional penalty tariffs of 25% are reduced, then I think it'll make things much simpler for our Indian industry, particularly gems and jewelry, diamonds and textiles,
so, but the
and
point
shrimps
is,
and others.
Of course. When you say that we should be focusing on trying to remove those additional penalty tariffs that has been imposed on India because of our consistent purchase of Russian oil. But since the start, history and data is proof that Trump has used tariffs as a measure to negotiate business, not just businesses, but geopolitical relations that go beyond the realm of businesses itself. I will draw in one last comment from Mr. Gurucharan Das. So we are losing time, but your closing statement, please.
But no, very quickly, I think we need to correct one misimpression, and that is what Mr. Vij said, that he said that what I want to correct is that the 500% tariff is coming from the Congress. That will not be, the Supreme Court will have nothing to do. There'll be no legal review on that, because Congress has authority to in that area. The reason why it's gone to court is because they're questioning Mr. Trump and the executive's authority. So what I think is a much more serious challenge is the one from the Congress, and that's why I think we'll just have to stop buying oil from Russia.
All right, point noted. Well,
and then we also have a tariff of 25%, which is a lot more manageable than 50%.
Understood. But thank you so much. That's all the time, ladies and gentlemen, I had on this show. Thank you so much, Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador, Arkevich, President TAI, that's Textile Associations of India, Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and as well as Gurucharan Das, former CEO, P&G India. Thank you so much, all of you, for giving us your time and for your valuable inputs, and of course, giving us a direction on how to think about these Trump's tariffs that will be on trial this evening. And viewers, as experts highlighted, many think that even if Trump's tariffs were to be struck down, Trump will not budge from imposing tariffs on the world. For example, Section 301 could be in use. But of course, we will have to see how India tries to balance its relationship with the US as we maneuver through this tariff storm. Thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. This is Malika Mishra. We'll keep you updated. Keep watching NDTV Profit.